An improbable but much needed win for the Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Wednesday? Yes, January 15th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we're breaking down last night's unlikely win over the Tampa Bay Lightning, especially considering all of the roster movement that took part prior to puck drop. And we'll break that all down later on with notably Matt Poitras coming up, Charlie McAvoy being placed on IR. We'll discuss some stats and signals from that game as well. Now with 3 days off ahead of their next tilt, which is Saturday in Ottawa against the Senators. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. If you're new to the podcast, I'm a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years now. Was a full-time hockey news writer for The Score up here in Toronto, and I've been hosting this podcast since 2019, and I was as least confident as ever heading into last night's game that the Bruins would pull off a win, and that was because they were going to be without their top two defensemen. Hampus Lindholm was placed on long-term injured reserve. There's no setback there, but it was more for cap purposes. We already knew he was out, but it was also announced that Charlie McAvoy had been placed on injured reserve. He's been dealing with a nagging injury for a little bit, and he's going to be shut down for at least the next couple of games, including last night's game. So he'll also miss Saturday's game. They'll see where he is next week. Corresponding to that, Mike Callahan was recalled from Providence, as was Matt Poitras. And Poitras made an immediate impact in this one, setting up a goal by Trent Frederic very early on to give this team a 1-0 lead. It was 1-0 at the 4:24 mark. Poitras skating on a 2-on-1, showing patience with the puck, outweighting Nick Perbix and sending a pass to Frederic for the tap in. I've often compared Poitras to David Krejci, and that was a Krejci-esque play on that one. Sacco said Poitras played well. They brought him up from Providence, and he obviously used his speed and offensive ability on that first goal. Did a lot of other good things with the puck. A lot of energy he brought to the game for the Bruins. So that was a positive for sure for the Bruins to get Poitras up. We'll discuss later on kind of his attitude about being called down and what he learned as well in his time with the Providence Bruins that hopefully is over. Another big storyline was Parker Wotherspoon making it 2-0 with his first NHL goal. His mom was in the crowd last night too, so it made it even more special. An absolute rocket of a wrist shot past Andrei Vasilevsky. What a thing it is to score your first NHL goal against a guy like Andrei Vasilevsky. But the biggest story last night was the play of Jeremy Swayman. And without his solid positioning and goaltending, the Bruins likely would have been in a different boat than they were last night. They were up 4-0 at one point. They ended up winning 6-2 thanks to a couple of empty net goals. The Lightning were able to chip away a little bit and make it somewhat interesting heading into the third. But Jeremy Swayman with one of, if not his best game of the season, and despite the fact he's only 2-4 here in 2025, he does have a 919 save percentage in his last 6 games. And in particular last night and the game on Saturday against the Florida Panthers. He, quite frankly, stole these two games. He made 43 saves against the Panthers, 45 saves last night. He faced 43 shots, made 40 saves, faced 45 shots last night, made 43 saves, a .956 save percentage, and he was definitely looking like the Jeremy Swayman that we've come to know, come to love, and that earned that big contract here this past offseason. Sway came up large, said interim coach Joe Sacco, and he allowed the Bruins to come out with these 2 points. Having a strong start helped them a lot, of course, getting those two or that early goal, jumping out to a 2-0 lead, eventually a 4-0 lead. Huge momentum builder for the Bruins, said Jeremy Swayman. So that was probably the biggest storyline from last night, was Jeremy Swayman's play and his ability to steal a couple games. Now, on the Tampa side of things, they were without one of their better players. That could have made a difference. Braden Point was a healthy scratch after he missed a team meeting. But, hey, that's their decision. That's their problem. The Bruins came out. Tampa still obviously loaded offensively and were able to put up a ton of shots, a ton of opportunities for them, as we'll see here as we dig into the stats in a couple moments. But at the end of the day, Jeremy Swayman stood up, came up big for his team, and if he is the guy that we think he is, then the Bruins will have a much better shot at holding on to their increasingly tenuous standing in the playoffs. And there's a lot of teams making charges right now. Your Montreals, your Columbuses. Detroit's been hot lately, although they were beat pretty bad last night by San Jose. Jeremy Swayman needs to be that guy for the Bruins to stay in the thick of the playoff race. It was great to see some fight as well. I mentioned Trent Frederick getting that first goal, which was much needed for him, but he also stood up and defended Mark Kastelik, who is out of the lineup thanks to a cross-check from Tampa defenseman Lilleberg. Frederick came up and delivered right after right on Lilleberg, and Jeremy Swayman in particular was not happy with how the Bruins did not show a lot of fight in that game against Tampa, especially late. And you see a guy like Charlie McAvoy, who was criticized for not maybe jumping in. We also see him now. He's out injured. There was a picture of him wearing a brace or a cast on his wrist, so maybe that's why he wasn't jumping in and getting super physical. Trent Frederick last night stepped up, and amid all the trade speculation, questions about his future with the team, that's if Trent Frederick can bring that each and every night, some offense, some physicality, some grit, some fight for his team, then that's a guy that they need. And obviously it's up to him whether or not he wants to stick around as an unrestricted free agent. But if he's going to bring that more and more each and every night, then he's the guy that the Bruins should look to keep around. And credit to Poitras for reinvigorating that third line a little bit, for getting the scoring going. And a huge, huge win for the Bruins last night. They'll now get 3 days off to rest. But we'll take a look at some of the key stats and signals to take away from last night's game here as the podcast continues. I just love going to live events, whether it's a hockey game or a concert, and Game Time makes it so easy to get tickets for your next live event and create some unforgettable memories with your friends. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The Super Deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, their all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. That's Game Time, because what time is it? It's game time. Now, similar to the game on Saturday against the Panthers, the Bruins were largely outplayed in this one. If you look at the underlying stats, the Lightning had 64% of the shot attempts in this one. They outshot the Bruins 45-24. Scoring chances were 35-19 in favor of the Lightning. High danger scoring chances were 16-7 in favor of Tampa. And they had the expected goals advantage as well. 3.13 compared to 2.5. The difference in this one, Andre Vasilevsky was beat often and early, and the Bruins got that exceptional goaltending from Jeremy Swayman. There's a thing called score effects that came into place where when a team is up, they tend to sit back a bit, and the other team will rack up the possession stats because they are chasing the game a little bit and going all out offensively. And yes, the Lightning did mount a charge, certainly in the later parts of the game. But it was, again, Swayman who stepped up and made some massive saves for this team in order to preserve the win. Now, again, losing Braden Point or missing Braden Point right from the get-go set the Lightning back, but that's neither here nor there. From a Bruins perspective, they can just play against, the players that are in front of them. It was a big night for a few key players offensively. David Pastrnak kept things going with his recent hot streak. He has now scored like 7 goals over his last 4 or 5 games. He was very instrumental in last night's victory, of course, with 3 points, a goal, 2 assists. He was matched by Pavel Zacha, who had a goal and 2 assists as well. He chipped in one of the empty net goals. The Lightning had pulled their goalie late in the game. Brandon Carlo was assessed a pretty questionable tripping call. And then the bonus of that was that the Bruins could ice the puck at will and not have it called icing because they were on the penalty kill. So they got a shorthanded goal from Andrew Peeke, and then a shorthanded empty netter from Pavel Zacha to ice things as well. Speaking of questionable calls, there was one earlier in the game when Cole Koepke was just absolutely leveled by Darren Radish. Originally, it was called a major, but then they rescinded a penalty. I think it was a bit late. It was high. You could argue kind of both ways on that one, but the fact that on the broadcast, Judd Surratt said, one of the things you have to look at in determining a penalty here is whether Radish could have taken another route. And while Koepke, this whole play was set up because there was a bad icing call in the first place. Lightning defenseman really dogged it on the way back. Could have gathered the puck before it went over the red line. It was called icing. Koepke, who was already gassed, giving it his all to get the puck out of the zone and up the ice. He extended himself, reached for the puck, banged it out, and then instead of following the puck and going to collect it, Radish leaned in and leveled Koepke. Hopefully he's going to be okay. He did look rather shaken up. That could have changed the complexity of the game, but all it did was remove Koepke. The Lightning were not penalized at all. And that kind of fed into some of the penalties that arose later in the game. Nikita Zadorov fighting Eric Cernak, Anthony Cirelli and Parker Witherspoon getting into it, Frederick fighting Lilleberg. It all kind of fed into, some of that rough stuff that came up that was also carrying over from the previous game just last week. So, Pasta, Zacha, each with 3-point nights. Pastrnak led the way with 4 shots on goal for the Bruins. On the back end, Andrew Peeke with a 2-point game, a goal, and an assist. Peeke was instrumental in setting up that Pastrnak goal, just a great offensive zone rush. The puck found its way to Pasta, who had kind of wiped out. I don't know what was wrong with the ice last night, but there were so many wipeouts, guys losing an edge. Pasta, that happened to him, but he was able to get up in time to beat Vasilevsky. And then Witherspoon with his first, that obviously was another key stat for the Bruins last night. Now, when it comes to goal differential, the Bruins improved their goal differential now to -22, still second worst in the Eastern Conference, unfortunately. When it comes to points, they were able to draw level with Tampa for third place in the Atlantic, 49 points apiece. However, the Lightning still have 4 games in hand, so they have the advantage when it comes to point percentage. The Bruins still find themselves behind a bunch of teams that won last night, including the Ottawa Senators, who are on a 3-game winning streak. The Columbus Blue Jackets, who have won 5 in a row. They're 8-2 over their past 10. The Montreal Canadiens, who are 7-2-1. They won last night. The Bruins behind each of those teams. They are also now ahead of Detroit, whose 7-game winning streak came to an end last night. But overall, in terms of point percentage, the Bruins are still in 10th with 3 teams to jump if they want to, or 2 teams at least to jump if they want to jump into a wild card spot. Technically, they're in the first wild card spot, but they're 1 point ahead of Columbus, who has 2 games in hand. They're only 2 points ahead of Ottawa, who have 3 games in hand. They're 3 points ahead of Montreal, who has 3 games in hand. And they're 5 points ahead of the Red Wings, who have 3 games in hand. So very, very close. And this was a game the Bruins really needed to have in order to even stay in the top 10 in terms of point percentage. The game on Saturday will be massive against the Ottawa Senators. They have got a red-hot young goalie in Levi Merilainen, who had a shutout last night against the New York Islanders. The Bruins will need to keep it going, especially as they head into a very busy week next week with 4 games on deck. I don't know if a lot of these roster changes will stay in place, but we'll take a look at some of the signals to take away from last night's game and kind of a depleted roster that the Bruins are playing with, which just added to the improbability of last night's win. Here as the pod continues. If you're looking to hire, then you quite simply need Indeed. I've been on Indeed quite a lot lately because I'm looking for a new full-time job, and it's a great platform for hiring and for searching. And when it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. You can stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach candidates faster. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply, but check out Indeed. Get that $75 sponsored job credit by going to Indeed.com/lockedon, because if you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Now, on paper last night, the Bruins, even with Braden Point out of the lineup, were playing with a much inferior roster to the Tampa Bay Lightning. The top six remained somewhat intact, although you had Vinny Lettieri playing on the second line with Brad Marchand and Elias Lindholm. Then you had Trent Frederick playing with Matt Poitras and Charlie Coyle on the third line. Cole Koepke, John Beecher, Justin Brazeau on the fourth line. So they were out without Mark Kastelic. Of course, he was placed on IR. And then you had Matt Poitras jumping in and taking a spot as well. And then on defense, the situation was even worse. Nikita Zadorov, Brandon Carlo, Mason Lohrei, Parker Witherspoon, Michael Callahan making his NHL debut with Andrew Peeke. Hopefully McAvoy and Lindholm can come back sooner than later. McAvoy's at least out for the next game against Ottawa, and they're going to reassess ahead of the busy 4-game week next week. Lindholm's making progress. He's been skating quite a bit lately. They had extra bodies up because Charlie Coyle was a game time decision due to illness. So Kastelic out, Poitras in, Lettieri in, with Mark McLaughlin being sent down due to, after being placed on waivers. Now, when it comes to Matt Poitras, a lot of people say, why was he not up all season long? Look what the immediate impact that he made. But he even admitted that it was a benefit to go down. He said when he first got down, it was tough playing more. You go from playing limited minutes to getting more shifts, helps you figure out what you need to do more of on the ice and get in better shape and be able to play more minutes. He feels more comfortable as a player than when he went down. He feels better overall being on the ice quite a bit, found the love for the game again. Makes you feel better when you get on the ice every day and come to the rink. When you get that confidence and you're rolling, it's a great feeling. So that is what happened because he was sent down. He might not have looked as confident last night without that demotion and some time in Providence, carrying big minutes and playing in all situations. So in the end, perhaps that time in Providence was good for him and will help him and the team moving forward. And Matt Poitras, again, brought some energy, some poise, brought some puck carrying ability and creativity that the Bruins have been lacking. And it's easy to say, well, they shouldn't have sent him down because look at what he's able to do out there. But it took that demotion and that time in Providence for him to regain his confidence, find that love for the game again. He did admit that, it was tough being sent down at first. It had a toll on his mental health, but to be able to get out there and really show what he can do on a consistent level and in big minutes, it really did help to build him up. And again, I've always said that a healthy, confident Matt Poitras is what this Bruins team needs. I want him to stay up with the Bruins, and based on his performance last night, there's no real reason to send him down. And once Kastelic's back, you have him in the lineup instead of Lettieri. We'll see what Cole Koepke, if he is injured for quite a bit of time. If not, perhaps they could, or they might have to call someone else up, maybe a Fabian Lysell, maybe a Georgi Merkulov. I'd love to see some of these young guys get incorporated into the lineup because they bring that freshness, they bring that offensive creativity that this team is lacking, and it will give them some experience because right now they're basically in playoff mode down the stretch. Every 2 points, every point is so important, especially with the loser point. You have so many teams in the mix right now for a playoff spot. In the Eastern Conference, you have 12 teams at 500 or better. The Rangers making a bit of a resurgence here. You have the Red Wings, who are strong under Todd McLellan. The Canadiens, Blue Jackets are a great story, of course. The Senators looking like a pretty good team at the moment. So the Bruins are going to have to fight each and every night if they want to make it to the playoffs. Even if they don't make it, that experience would be good for some of these young guys who are out to prove that they belong with the Boston Bruins, that they can be contributing members moving forward. And with some decisions to make in the offseason with regards to Trent Frederick, etc., you have a lot of guys who are fighting to be core members of this team moving forward, including Joe Sacco, who's basically coaching for the right to keep coaching this team and to have that interim tag taken off. The Bruins, again, 3 days off now. It'll give them a time to heal up, get rid of any of this sickness that's going through the locker room that Charlie Coyle was suffering from. They've got 5 games between this Saturday and next Saturday, including the Senators twice, the Sharks, the Devils, and the Colorado Avalanche. 3 matinees in there as well. So they're going to have to get healthy, get sharp, and see what they can do here over this next stretch to really assert themselves as a playoff team. But last night's game was a huge step in the right direction. Jeremy Swayman looking like the goalie that we all expected him to be after signing that big-time contract, and that he needs to be being paid that highly. And after making such a case about wanting to have that kind of salary moving forward. So that's today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, my friends. I do have some thoughts about the quarter century team, specifically the inclusion of Milan Lucic, but I'll break that down on tomorrow's podcast, as well as bring you all the latest on the black and gold, because that's what we do here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. Check out the Locked On Fantasy podcast next, because they will give you all the tips you need to get the edge over your competition this week. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.